That's a minor 2-5-1, and if you play jazz piano, you need to be comfortable with this progression. While the most common progression in jazz is the major 2-5-1, the minor 2-5-1 is the second most common, and most beginners ignore it for far too long. It shows up in tunes like Softly as in a Morning Sunrise, Mr. PC, Caravan, literally any minor blues, Alone Together, Beautiful Love, and pretty much every standard in a minor key. You'll even finding it hiding inside longer chord progressions like the 3-6-2-5-1, certain turnarounds, and even in major tunes. But most players take a long time to feel confident with the minor 2-5-1 because it's harder to know what actually fits over this chord progression. So in this video, I'm going to make it simple for you. We're going to stick to one main scale, the harmonic minor, and I'm going to show you 10 easy phrases that you can use to start sounding great over minor 2-5-1s. And I'll also show you some classic bebop techniques that you can use to connect your ideas smoothly from chord to chord. Each phrase borrows something from the previous one, so by the end you'll start to hear how to connect these ideas and come up with your own lines. So before we jump into the phrases here, I just want to show you how it's going to be the most effective for you to practice along with this video. So we're going to be using very simple voicings for this. I'm mostly just going to be doing a root position 2 chord, D, F, A flat, and C in the left hand. And then when we go to the 5 chord, I'm just going to be moving my top 2 fingers, the second and my thumb, down a half step. And even though the chord symbol here has a flat 9, I'm just doing a normal G7 in my left hand. And then when we go to the C minor 6, I'm doing 1, 3, 5, and then I'm using the A natural. So just get comfortable with that, because that's going to be the foundation for your left hand that we're going to be using for this whole video. That'll just make it a lot simpler when you're doing a lot in your right hand, just to keep your left hand simple, and you'll know exactly what to do. So let's go ahead and jump into our first phrase, which is this. And the reason I included this one is because it mostly just uses chord tones. Right? I'm just using the root 3rd and 5th of the 2 chord, and then I'm switching the A flat to the G for the 5 chord, and then I do add the D and the B natural from the harmonic minor scale. Once again, our harmonic minor is this. And I'm using the A flat and the B. So having the natural 6th and then the raised 7th. So I'm using a couple of different extra notes from the harmonic minor, but mostly in this phrase, we're just using chord tones. And the reason this works so well is because the rhythm is really solid. I'm using a repeated rhythmic idea. I'm going 1, 2, and then I repeat it on beat 4, 4, 1, and then I repeat it again on beat 3, 3, 4, and, right? So because the rhythm is so solid, I can just use chord tones and it sounds really nice, sounds really great. So as we go on to the second one, notice I'm just making one modification from the first one to the second one, and that is that we're adding a lower neighbor below our first note. And there's one more modification at the end there, which we'll get to. But notice how this G, it adds just a little bit of tension to that flatted 5th. And to me, it adds just a little bit of sadness. It makes the A flat just sound a little bit sadder. And then when we get into the third measure, we're going to use some chromatic passing tones. So we're going from the C to the D, and then rather than just going something like this, and just using the harmonic minor, I'm using some chromatic notes to get from the D to the B. So I'm going, and that is kind of our first real bebop chromatic idea, and that is we can go between chord tones or even between scale tones using chromatic notes. Hey, if you're watching this and you're a little bit confused about minor 2-5-1s, maybe you're not very familiar with them, and maybe you haven't spent a lot of time getting comfortable with seventh chords, I have a free ebook that you'll find in the description that walks you through a great way to practice 2-5-1 chord progressions. So if you're just wanting a beginning method just to get really comfortable with seventh chords so that you can watch a video like this and be able to follow along much more easily, I definitely recommend checking that out. So let's go ahead to the third one, and we're going to change our idea just a little bit. Let me play that one for you. This is another great example of a phrase that mostly just uses chord tones. So we have, I'm just using F minor on top of the D minor 7 flat 5, which is the third, the fifth, and the seventh of that D minor 7 flat 5 or half diminished chord. And then I'm using just root third and fifth for the 5 chord, and then root third and fifth for the 1 chord. Now, of course, I'm still using a little bit of that harmonic minor here. But mostly I'm just using chord tones. Once again, I'm showing you how we can use chord tones. And then if you want to, you can go a little bit beyond that and you can start adding some of those bebop techniques. So here's the third one. And then if we go on to our fourth phrase, we're just doing a little bit of chromaticism again, meaning we're adding chromatic notes that lead into the next part of the phrase. So let me play number 4 for you. And you might be saying, well, Michael, the A and the B flat, they're definitely not in that D minor 7 flat 5. Even if you play them by themselves, the A sounds terrible. If you play the B flat, that sounds a little bit better. But you know, in the context of the D minor 7 flat 5, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But that's one of the hallmarks of bebop, is that we can go into chords with chromatic notes. So once again, let's listen to that. So I'm using the A natural and the B flat to get into the A natural. And then I'm using a B flat, which is not in the G7. I'm using it to get to the C. And it just adds a little bit of interest, a little bit of rub, which gives us fuel to get from one chord to the next. And you can hear that when you hear it in context, it sounds like it's really leading us into the next chord. And so that's something that you'll notice in a lot of these chromatic ideas. Whenever we add notes that are not in the scale that we're using, it's to kind of give us fuel to get to the next idea or to get to our next destination note, and they're really effective in that manner. So continuing on to number 5, we're now kind of combining some ideas from numbers 3 and 4, and this is what I came up with here. This is actually combining some ideas from 3, 4, and number 1. In number 1, we repeated some ideas every 3 beats. And let's listen to number 5 once again, which uses some of that rhythmic pushing things a little bit earlier. So notice how I'm starting the 5 chord 1 beat early. And then this is a little more adventurous, but I'm starting that one chord, or at least I'm outlining that one chord a whole 2 beats early. So once again, and I included this just to highlight the fact that it's all about where we're going. As long as there's a way that we resolve that tension really quickly, it can sound really, really nice. It adds a lot of flavor and interest to that line. So once again. And then for this last part, we are reusing the chromaticism here from number 2. So starting to really combine some ideas from a lot of these different phrases. And once again, this is a way that you can approach this. When you're experimenting with phrases, I encourage you to find what works in one chord and try it in a bunch of different places. If you find one phrase that works, you want to figure out what I can play before it, what can I play after it, so that I can really expand my vocabulary. And then when you go to improvise, you'll feel like you're much more free to actually play what you want because you have so many options. So let's go on to number 6 and see what that has in store for us. So number 6. Now this one is a little bit more involved, so I'm going to write in some fingering here that I think will help. So the trick here is to be doing a thumb crossover from 2 to 1, right there. So I'm going 2, 1, 2, 4, and then again 2, 1, 2, 4, and then I'm staying in this position for the rest of the time until the very last beat. So, and then I'm doing 4-1. You could also do 5-1, but let's play that one more time. So. So now we break out of a lot of that triadic chord tone playing, and we're really playing the entire scale. So, right, all the way from the B to the G. And this is just a C minor idea that could go on any minor chord. Right? Hey, if you're watching this and you're wondering, how do I come up with so many ideas just from one chord progression? Well, I actually have a course called From Lines to Melodies, which walks you through my entire process for learning how to come up with your own lines and improvise them. Especially if you're new to jazz, the theory that we talk about with jazz and all the different chords can be a little bit overwhelming. And so From Lines to Melodies just kind of clears that all away and shows you how to connect melodies, how to come up with melodies on your own, so that you don't have to rely on, regurgitated phrases like the ones that I'm giving you in this video. It can absolutely be helpful to learn what different phrases sound like, how different techniques sound, and also to start building your vocabulary. But when you're just getting started, it is much more helpful to be able to come up with your own phrases using what you already know, rather than feeling like you need to learn everything from the ground up. So I definitely recommend checking that out. The link is in the bio, and let's continue on with the rest of the video. With the next few phrases, I just want you to take a look at how the rhythms are actually quite similar as you're going through these lines, but the contour of the line is much different. So let me play number 7 for you. So we're using some of those chromatic approach notes right here. And then take a notice that we're using this A flat. Now, A flat in the chord is that flat 9. Sometimes we include it in the chord symbol, sometimes we don't. But on a minor 2-5-1, a lot of times we will use an A flat. And it's already in our harmonic minor scale, but it's really important to know that maybe the main difference in our dominant chords between a major 2-5-1 and a minor 2-5-1 is that for the minor 2-5-1, we just need a little bit more dissonance, a little bit more grit as we're going from the 2 chord to the 5 chord. So a lot of times we will use that flat 9, right? And in this example, we're using it in our melody. So let's go on to number 8. Notice how the rhythm is the exact same between the two phrases, but the contour is flipped. Number 7 starts low and then goes up. Number 8 starts high and then goes down. And the fingering is a little bit tricky there, so let's find something that's going to work for you to practice it with. So I would probably start with my 5th finger on the A flat because it's the top of the line. And then I'm going to get to my 1st finger there. I'm going to switch to my 4th finger on the C sharp so that I can get to my 5th finger for the D. And then that's going to set me up for the rest of this measure. And I'm going to use 1, 2, 1 here. And then for the rest of this line, I can stay kind of in this position. So once again. Once again, remember how 7 and 8 used the same rhythm, but the contour was different. Now, number 9 is kind of combining the ideas of 7 and 8 to come up with a new phrase. So as we were going through number 7 and 8, remember that the rhythm between 7 and 8 was actually the exact same, but the contour was different, meaning the way that the melody was moving was very different. So number 9 shows you how I combine some ideas from 7 and 8 to come up with a completely new phrase. So we have the beginning of this phrase, which is basically coming directly from number 8, and then everything else that comes after it is from number 7. So because I know that I need to land on the 3rd of the 5 chord if I want to combine these two phrases, I actually need to use a skill called linear connection, which is basically where I have a certain place where I want to get to that I'm targeting, and then I work backwards from that. And then I can continue on with the phrase that I learned previously. So this is actually a skill from my course, From Lines to Melodies, which really teaches you how to connect these ideas from chord to chord. When you're learning phrases like this, it can be tempting just to play them as is, but it can feel really disconnecting if you're just playing a solo that is just a conglomeration of a bunch of different phrases that you learned from different places. So I always recommend trying to build this skill of linear connection so that you can come up with your own phrases and feel like you're in charge of the way that you're playing, rather than feeling like you're just putting together a bunch of different disparate ideas. So for number 10, I actually want to clue you in to the way that I'm actually approaching coming up with this line. So I'm thinking of each chord as having kind of a destination that I'm trying to get to. So on the 2 chord, I have the A flat, and then on the G7, I have the B that I'm trying to get to, and then the C minor 6, I have the G that I'm trying to get to. So if I start on the 5th of the 2 chord and just go down, I get to this C, and I know that I have 2 more 8th notes to get to the 3rd of the 5 chord. And I can just use those chromatic notes. And now if I go upward, I get to beat 3, and I realize, oh, I'm almost to my destination. So I can just back up, and then I can land on the G for the 1 chord. Once again, listen to that. And then I can continue on from there with my C minor. So once again. So I hope that you can see from these 10 phrases how you can come up with your own ideas and how you can use these phrases as kind of a template for how you can mix and match and come up with phrases that are really going to help you play on minor 2-5-1 chord progressions. Again, in this video, we ended up using a lot of ideas from my course From Lines to Melodies, so if that was helpful, go ahead and check that out in the link in the description and see if it's something that's going to help you get to the next stage in your playing. All of the phrases in this video used the harmonic minor scale, so if you'd like to see other ways that you can play over a minor 2-5-1 chord progression, check out this recent video where I actually walk you through 5 different ways to approach the minor 2-5-1 so you can have a lot of interest and variety in your lines. So thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.